My name is Captain Eva Hall, 35 years of age. Third tour of duty recently concluded. Iraq once more. Identical dust. Identical heat. Identical body bags. Sealed in quietude. However, this time, something deep in my instincts whispered, "Don't inform anyone you're returning home." So, I didn't. Didn't send messages, didn't call, didn't share some homecoming photograph with effects and a banner. I gathered my gear, surrendered my weapon, and traveled 22 hours back to American territory without even a murmur. By the time my boots touched the pavement outside my grandparents' residence in Masonville, Virginia, the sun was descending low and fierce behind the oak trees. The porch light remained dark. That was the initial warning sign. The second, no response at the entrance. I still possessed my key. Identical brass one grandfather provided me when I reached 13. "You ever need to enter?" he declared, "this still functions." And it did. The lock clicked and I entered a quietude that weighed on my chest like a concrete block. The house smelled incorrect. Not filthy, not decayed, just vacant, barren, as though no one had inhaled inside it for far too long. I shouted out for Grandma. Nothing. I examined the living room initially. Tidy as usual. Blanket arranged. TV remote positioned with surgical accuracy. Then the kitchen, then her gardening boots beside the rear door, then the primary bedroom. That's where I discovered her. She was in the hospital bed we'd installed 2 years prior following her stroke. Identical blue linens, identical floral pillowcase, but now there were devices, silent ones, cold ones. Oxygen wheezed in gentle pulses. A monitor flickered dull green. Her hands were slack. One eye was partially open as though she was attempting to wake but couldn't determine if it was worth the effort. No nurse, no aide, no family, just her and the devices and me. I remained there for 5 minutes before I could budge. My stomach felt as though it was constructed of sand and steel and terrible memories. I inspected her cleaned the corner of her mouth with a tissue, straightened her blanket. I murmured, "It's me, Grandma." Eva's returned. She didn't move. I glanced around. Not a single recovery card. No water cup. No fresh blossoms. Just silence. That's when I retrieved my phone. Perhaps I overlooked something. No messages from Mom. No voicemails from Dad. Just one recent Facebook post timestamped an hour earlier. Sunsets in Cabo never grow tiresome. No regrets. Retired existence. Finally liberated. My parents clutching cocktails on a beach, grinning like they didn't have a mother with 1 foot already crossing the threshold. And that's when something inside me ceased being military-grade numb and became razor-sharp. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't being occupied. This was desertion. I walked down the corridor past the old photograph of Grandpa in his Navy uniform. He gazed directly into the camera as though he was looking through time at me. His safe was in the study. The identical one he kept secured when I was a child. Everyone assumed it contained gold coins or classified documents. Only he and I knew the reality. He'd revealed to me once back when I received my commission. "If anything occurs to me or her and they don't appear, open the safe. You'll understand what to do." He meant they. Naturally, my parents. His own son and daughter-in-law. I knelt, entered the code. My service number. The safe clicked open as though it had just been waiting. Inside was a thick envelope. My name written in that rigid all-caps handwriting of his. "Eva, if you're reading this, it means I trusted you to be present." I took a breath, then opened it, and I felt the wind change. There was no cash inside the envelope. No keys, no offshore account numbers, just paper. 4 sheets of it, to be precise. 3 were typed, 1 was handwritten. The typed ones were legal, thick stock. Notarized at the bottom, dated 2 years ago. Title, Last Will and Testament of James Henry Hall. Grandpa's complete name. Navy veteran, World War II, son of a Virginia coal miner. Husband, father, betrayed man. The will was clean, cold, unforgiving. If my son and daughter-in-law are not physically present within 12 hours of either my or my wife's incapacitation or passing, they forfeit all inheritance rights, financial or otherwise. 12 hours. Grandma had been on life support for 3 days. I verified the hospital records later to be certain. In such event, all property liquid or fixed is to be transferred to my granddaughter, Captain Eva Hall, United States Army, the only person in this family to uphold the values of honor, duty, and presence. That was the word that struck me hardest. Presence. He didn't say love or loyalty or even blood. He said presence. Because appearing matters more than posting photos with margaritas. I stared at that clause for an extended time. My fingers were shaking, but not from shock, from recognition. He saw it approaching. Grandpa knew they'd disappear when it mattered most. Not out of malice, out of habit, out of selfishness, disguised as self-care. They always said things like, "We've earned our tranquility," or, "It's our moment now." As if raising children meant you could simply erase your parents when they became inconvenient. The 4th page, the handwritten one, was just for me. Eva, if you're reading this, then they failed the final test. Don't feel guilty. Don't argue. Don't negotiate. Just execute what's written. They chose the beach. You chose the bedside. That's all the court will need to know. P.S. The lawyer's name is Gregory Thorne. His number's taped under the drawer. He's been waiting for this. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood up, walked to the desk, peeled back the underside of the top drawer, and found the number scribbled in fading Sharpie. Gregory Thorne. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Captain Hall," he said calmly, like we'd spoken yesterday. "Your grandfather told me if you were the one calling, it meant the rest of them weren't worth a dime. I'm guessing it's time." "It's time," I said. "Good," he replied. "I'll file the trigger clause immediately. You don't need to do anything else. You being there is proof enough." I gave him the hospital's fax number and hung up. Then I sat back in Grandpa's study, still in uniform, still covered in airport dust, and waited for the storm to begin. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, the hospital called my mother. 15 minutes after that, I heard the first ping on my phone. Then another, then another. I didn't answer. I watched the sun crawl down the wall like it had somewhere better to be. Watched Grandma's monitor pulse like a slow heartbeat that refused to quit just yet. After 2 hours, I finally looked at my phone again. 90 missed calls from my mother, my father, their lawyer, even my little brother. The one who hadn't called Grandma in 6 months, but was suddenly deeply concerned about family unity. It was almost amusing. Almost. Because when people think they've got control, they stop checking the locks. They stop appearing. They get complacent. But the moment that control slips, when the will is no longer theirs, when the money moves without their hand, that's when they panic. That's when they start dialing. That's when they realize they were never the center of the story. They were just extras in someone else's legacy. And I was the only one who stayed long enough to turn the final page. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee in Grandma's kitchen. Same chipped kettle, same creaky cabinet door. The smell of folders and old wood almost fooled me into thinking things were normal. That maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up to her humming hymns and cracking eggs into a skillet, telling me my hair needed trimming, and my uniform made me look too tired. But the machines were still humming in the next room. The oxygen hissed like a sleeping dragon, and my parents were still 300 miles away sipping overpriced cocktails in swimwear that probably cost more than Grandma's annual prescriptions. They still hadn't arrived. They hadn't even booked a flight, but they had called again and again and again. By 10 a.m., the missed call count had passed 180. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I met with Gregory Thorne at the hospital's administrative office. He was older than I expected, maybe late 70s. Crisp beige suit, hands that looked like they'd once turned wrenches. A former Marine, judging by the faded tattoo peeking out beneath his cuff. He greeted me like I was family. "James was a damn good man," he said. "Trusted you more than he trusted oxygen." We walked through the paperwork together. The trigger clause was airtight. My grandfather hadn't just written a will. He'd written a damn operation manual. He had pre-authorized me to make medical decisions for both himself and Grandma in the event of parental absence. Had assigned me executor of the estate, listed precise bank accounts, contingencies, and even a modest $5,000 donation to the Masonville War Memorial with the words, "For the forgotten ones who showed up anyway." I signed where I needed to, calmly, without a lawyer of my own. Gregory handled everything. And then came the call that shifted everything. Hospital administration received confirmation my parents would not be arriving within the required window. Their reason: travel conflict and emotional distress. I nearly laughed. They had 3 days. 3 whole days. And in that time, they posted 17 photos from Cabo, boat cruises, lobster tail, spa selfies, and one particularly obnoxious caption that read, "Learning to finally live." No guilt, no obligations. No obligations, indeed. Well, now they possessed no legal claim either. At 11:32 a.m., I stood beside Grandma's bed and signed the authorization for complete hospice transition. No more machines, no more tubes, just comfort and dignity. What she should have received days earlier. I held her hand as the nurse gently removed the 4-line and dimmed the room lights. She didn't wake up, didn't flinch, but I swear her breathing slowed, settled like her body finally knew it was permitted to stop fighting. I whispered, "I'm here, Grandma. I'm still here." And then I sat down and waited. It wasn't a dramatic scene. No music, no gasp, no tear rolling down her cheek, just silence and stillness. And then peace. At 12:14 p.m., Grandma Hall passed away. And 10 seconds later, my phone vibrated again. This time, I picked up just once. It was my mother. Her voice was shrill, breathless, panicked. "Eva, what did you do? What the hell did you do?" "She's gone," I said flatly. "What? You don't get to make that decision. We're the family." "You weren't here," I cut her off, "for 3 days. We were in Cabo. Your father needed rest. You don't know what we've." "She's gone, Mom. And the will has already been executed. You can call your lawyer or you can call a therapist. I don't care which. You cold-hearted little." Click. I ended the call and turned off the phone. She didn't call back. Not for another hour. And when she did, the count began again. By 3 p.m., another 41 missed calls from her, from my father, from their lawyer, from 3 numbers I didn't recognize. Probably cousins they hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly concerned. But the switch had already flipped. The documents were filed. The accounts were locked. The house was mine. The land, the savings, the name. All of it had changed hands without a single shout, without a fight, without a fist raised or a door slammed. Because the truth is, real power doesn't need to scream. It just signs the papers and lets the silence do the work. They landed the next morning. Private car from Dallas, designer luggage, sunglasses too large for the storm they were about to walk into. I heard the tires on the gravel before I saw them. From Grandma's bedroom window, I watched as my father stepped out first, jaw tight, shoulders rigid. He always postured like he was still in charge of something. My mother followed behind, phone in hand, already barking into it. Her lips moved fast. Her free hand waved like she was swatting away the air. Probably some lawyer on the line, or her therapist, or one of those friends who only existed for brunch and gossip. They didn't knock. Of course, they didn't. They walked in like they still owned the place, like nothing had changed. I stayed seated in Grandpa's study, papers in front of me, mug of black coffee beside an old brass lamp. The envelope still sat there. So did the photo of him and Grandma, both in uniform, taken in 1951. They looked proud, tired, real. Footsteps. Then the door opened. My mother appeared first. She didn't greet me, just stared at the envelope on the desk like it had insulted her personally. My father stood behind her, silent, but red in the face. "You don't have the right," she snapped. "You had no authority to make that call. You had 3 days," I said. 3 days to come home. She died alone. That's on you. You think this is about you? About your little uniform fantasy and control? No, I said calmly. It's about her and Grandpa and showing up. Something you stopped doing a long time ago. My father spoke then, voice like gravel. You're making a mistake, Eva. This will be undone. I've already talked to Michael. We'll sue. I raised an eyebrow. You mean Michael, your lawyer, or Michael, your golf buddy? Because I doubt either of them can erase a notarized will, 2 hospital timestamps, and a damn good memory. James was senile when he wrote that. My mother hissed. No, he was furious, I corrected, but crystal clear. And I have the video to prove it. Her face froze. What video? I reached into the drawer, pulled out a USB drive, and tossed it lightly onto the desk. He recorded it a year ago. Addressed it to whoever contested the will. Said if they couldn't show their face when it counted, they didn't deserve a cent of his name. My father stepped forward like he might try to take it. I didn't flinch. Try it, I said quietly. Try reaching across this desk and grabbing something that doesn't belong to you anymore. His hand froze in midair. There was a moment of pure silence. Then he lowered it. My mother turned to him, voice cracking. We're not going to let her get away with this. She's not getting away with anything, I said, voice low. She stayed. You left. That's it. My mother's face twisted into something ugly, something almost childlike. She was our mother. And my grandmother, I said. One of us was holding her hand when she died. One of us was checking into a spa. You vindictive little. She asked for you, I cut in the final hour, still hoping you'd come. Still making excuses for you. I didn't say anything. I just sat there because she didn't need excuses. She needed family. They didn't speak. Not for a while. Just stood there absorbing it, or trying to figure out how to spin it. Eventually, my father turned away. Not in shame but in calculation. You could see the gears turning. They didn't cry. They didn't apologize. They just walked out of the room. The door didn't slam. No theatrics. Just the quiet click of entitlement exiting the building. Later that afternoon, their lawyer called me directly, offered to mediate a resolution. I declined. They tried to file a motion to contest the will the next day, claimed emotional duress. Gregory handled it before lunch. The court dismissed the motion before it even reached a hearing. No standing, they said. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter. My parents had hired a PR firm to craft a statement claiming estrangement and abuse from my grandparents, painting themselves as victims of a controlling patriarch and emotionally distant daughter. I posted nothing, said nothing. Didn't need to. Truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground and waits for the lies to rot in daylight. And so I stayed in that house, cleaned the guest room, donated Grandma's wardrobe to the church, sat out back on the old bench where Grandpa used to smoke and tell me war stories. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. 3 months later, I was served. They went through with it. Filed a formal lawsuit against me in state court. Undue influence, elder coercion, fraudulent executor claim. Real dramatic stuff, the kind of language you hire when you can't win on facts, so you throw words like darts and hope one sticks. Gregory just chuckled when I handed him the envelope. They're desperate, he said, flipping through the pages. They've got no case, but they want noise. I nodded. Let them make noise. I'll bring the silence. The court date was set. Mid-June. Small county courthouse. No jury, just a judge, a recorder, and whatever dignity they could scrape up. I wore my uniform that day, not out of show, just because it felt right. It still smelled like desert dust and hospital floors. I hadn't cleaned it. I didn't want to. They arrived flanked by 2 lawyers and a third guy in a $2,000 suit, who looked like he thought he was the smartest man in the room. He tried to smile at me. I didn't return it. When the judge asked for opening statements, their attorney went full melodrama. Captain Hall, though an admirable soldier, used her presence during a moment of family tragedy to manipulate her grandparents into disinheriting their only son. She isolated them, pressured them emotionally. We believe she exerted undue influence at a time when they were most vulnerable. He sat down like he just delivered the Gettysburg Address. The judge didn't even blink. Gregory stood next. No long words, Your Honor, just facts. He walked over, plugged in a small flash drive, and hit play. The screen flickered to life. There was Grandpa, sitting in his recliner, same gray cardigan, same blue plaid blanket over his knees. He looked into the camera with those same ice blue eyes I grew up under. If you're watching this, it means I'm probably dead or close. So, let's skip the niceties. He leaned in. I wrote the will myself. Every word. Nobody told me what to say. Nobody held my hand. The girl who will play this video, Captain Eva Hall, is the only one in this family who still understands what it means to show up when it's hard. My son, God bless him, is too busy golfing. His wife can't miss a massage. They'll say I was confused, that I was manipulated. Let me be clear. I've got more mental clarity than most of Congress. And if they weren't there when their own mother was dying, they don't deserve the dirt under her fingernails. He looked straight down the lens. Eva, this is war. But I trained you for that. Hold the line. Then the screen went black. Silence in the courtroom. Real silence. The kind that wraps around throats and dares anyone to swallow. The judge turned to their lawyer. Do you have anything to contradict this video? Medical records, doctor statements, anything other than theory? Their lawyer shuffled papers, flipped, blinked. Your Honor, we believe the video is emotionally charged, but... That's a no. Then Gregory stood again. I have one witness to call. Captain Eva Hall. I took the stand. Didn't cry. Didn't preach. I told the truth about the night I came home. The machines, the empty house, the Facebook post, the silence. I described Grandma's final moments. Her cold hand in mine, the slight lift of her chest, the last sigh of someone who waited just long enough to be seen. I ended with the line that mattered most. I didn't ask to inherit anything. I just stayed, and they didn't. The judge thanked me. No cross-examination. He took 10 minutes in chambers. When he returned, he read from a paper that would become part of public record. This court finds no evidence of coercion or fraud. The decedent's statements are consistent, intentional, and damning. The plaintiff's absence during their parents' final days speaks louder than any legal brief. Captain Hall is the lawful executor and sole beneficiary. Case dismissed with prejudice. No fanfare, no gavel slam, just truth on paper in ink. As I stood up to leave, my mother hissed under her breath. You'll regret this. I looked at her one last time. Not with anger, not even pity. Just this cold, detached clarity like you get when you finally see mold growing behind a wall and wonder how long it's been there, festering behind the paint. I already regretted it, I said. Every birthday you forgot her. Every anniversary you skipped. Every time she asked me if you'd call and I lied. Then I turned my back. Walked out of the courthouse and didn't look back. I moved back into the house for a while. Not forever. I didn't belong in that sleepy neighborhood of retirees and cracked sidewalks. But I couldn't leave right away either. There was something unfinished here. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just waiting. I kept Grandma's room just as it was. I folded her blanket, watered her violets, left the chair by the window untouched. Some mornings I sat there, coffee in hand, letting the sun creep in across the floorboards the way it always had. I could almost hear her voice, low, warm, still calling me Evie like I was 5. They stopped calling after the ruling. First, it was silence from my parents, then a trickle of venom online. Not from them directly, of course. They weren't that brave. But from their orbit, distant cousins, family friends, folks I hadn't seen since I was 12, who suddenly had opinions about loyalty and legacy. I ignored them all. Instead, I spent my days going through Grandpa's study. Letters, journals, receipts from 1983. He kept everything, but not out of sentiment, out of precision. The way a man trained to count bullets also counts blessings. One morning, I found something unexpected. A box labeled, "For the Fold." Inside was his burial flag, the one from his Navy funeral, perfectly trifold and wrapped in plastic. And under it a note. "I already had my honors. Don't bury me again. Give this to someone who will remember what it meant." I stared at that triangle of stars and stripes for a long time. That night, I drove out to Arlington, parked just before sunset, walked through rows of silence, gravel crunching beneath my boots, until I found his headstone. James Henry Hall, Chief Petty Officer, U.S. Navy, 1923 to 2004. Honor before comfort. I stood there until the sky turned lavender. Then I knelt and placed the flag beneath his name. No words, no prayer, just presence. I didn't notice the man until he spoke. "You were his." I turned. An old man in a wheelchair, leather jacket, faded cap that read USS Missouri. His eyes were roomy but sharp. "I was his granddaughter," I said. He nodded slowly. "I served under him. Korea, 1951. Toughest bastard I ever knew." We talked for 10 minutes about the ship, the drills, how Grandpa once decked a lieutenant for trying to dock drunk. "Got a week in the brig and a standing ovation," the man said, chuckling. I gave him the folded flag. He looked at me like I'd handed him gold. "That's not mine to keep." "I think he'd want you to have it," I said. "Someone who remembers." He blinked twice, saluted me. I saluted back. Then I left. Back at the house, I cleaned out the last closet. Found a shoebox full of my childhood drawings. One had a stick figure version of me in uniform standing beside a gray-haired man with a huge American flag behind us. I'd scribbled underneath it, "I will protect you when you get old, Grandpa." I didn't remember drawing it, but I knew it was true. I did protect him and her, even if it meant cutting out my own blood, even if it meant walking alone. Because that's the thing about silence. Real silence. It doesn't mean you lost the argument. It means you ended it permanently. No rebuttals, no spin. Just truth left standing where everything else collapsed. And once you've learned to live in that silence, you never go back to noise. The inheritance wasn't enormous. Some land, the house, a few investment accounts. Grandpa wasn't the kind to hoard wealth. He believed money should do something, not just sit around collecting dust and resentment. I sold the beachfront condo they'd left behind, the one my parents used to visit once a year just to take pictures for Christmas cards. They didn't even notice it was gone. They'd moved on to a new campaign, public sympathy. A month after the court ruling, my father published an op-ed in some online magazine for estranged fathers. Claimed I was a militant granddaughter who had brainwashed his dying parents into abandoning their only son. He even used the phrase, emotional hostage-taking. It was laughable, but I didn't laugh. I saved the link just in case, because I know people like that. They don't stop until they think they've rewritten the past. So, I started building something that couldn't be rewritten. I founded the Hall Foundation 6 months after Grandma died. Small, local, focused. Its mission: provide in-home support for aging veterans who don't have family to care for them. Nurses, transportation, grief counseling, burial honor guards, all covered, no questions asked. I used Grandpa's money. His house became the Foundation's first office. His study, once locked tight, turned into a space for legal aid and will preparation, free of charge. We printed a brochure with his photo and that same line he'd scrawled so many years ago, honor before comfort. People showed up. Old Marines, quiet army medics, one man from the Coast Guard who hadn't spoken to his family in 20 years, but came every Friday just to drink burnt coffee and talk about the weather. They told me stories about broken families, about dying wives, about hospital visits where no one came except a volunteer in a vest and a folded flag. One of them, Harold, a 91-year-old Navy radio tech, broke down in tears when I told him we'd cover his rent and send a nurse twice a week. He held my hand and whispered, "I thought I was done being remembered." The local paper did a story on us. Front page, granddaughter turns betrayal into brotherhood. The whole foundation serves forgotten veterans. My mother sent me a screenshot of it. No words, just a red question mark. I didn't respond because there was nothing to say. They had their chance to show up, and they didn't. A year later, we held our first Memorial Day event. Not the big one with flags and speeches and parades. Ours was different. A quiet ceremony in the backyard of the old Hall home. 37 folding chairs. A table with name cards. One empty chair up front with Grandpa's photo and a single bronze star on a velvet square. I stood up to speak. Told the truth about war, about absence, about how legacy isn't what you pass down in your will. It's who shows up when nobody's watching. I read the last words Grandpa ever wrote to me. In the end, don't fight for applause. Fight for the ones who aren't in the room to clap. When the ceremony ended, a man walked up to me in full dress blues. Late 30s, seal insignia, chest full of ribbons. He said, "I served with your cousin, Michael. He told me what your family tried to do." I tensed, ready for a lecture. But the man smiled, slow and sure. "Damn proud of you," he said. "Takes guts to walk alone." I still visit the grave every few months. Not out of duty, not even grief really, just to check in. To sit down, breathe in that clean air, and know that no matter how loud the world gets, I once chose the harder path and stayed. Stayed with the woman who raised me, stayed when the rest left. Stayed long enough to hold a hand, sign a paper, and carry a legacy that blood alone couldn't earn. Some people inherit money. I inherited purpose. And unlike money, purpose doesn't run out. It grows silently. Like honor does. If this story stayed with you, we ask just one thing. Remember her. Not for the uniform, not for the fight, but for the silence she held when others shouted over truth. This is Honor Line, and we tell stories no one else will. Subscribe if you're still here. It means you were meant to be.